We have a new revolution against the arrogant politicians and insensitive bureaucrats whose philosophy of tax, 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 spend, spend, spend.
Proposition 13 I think of as a really shocking event, like almost like a meteor that landed in California in a way. It couldn't have been predicted. There were lots of other solutions to the property tax crisis, but it had all kinds of powerful ripple effects.
So Isaac Martin, can you tell us about Prop 13 and kind of what circumstances it passed under?
At the time, people were being assessed and taxed on the market value of the homes they own. And so if the value of your house doubled since the last time you got assessed, then your property tax bill doubled too. The voters of California were really up in arms about this, and a lot of Californians were really concerned that they might actually be taxed out of their homes.
And what has been the long-term impact of Proposition 13?
It definitely slowed the growth of property tax revenues in California. And at the time, property taxes were the main source of revenue for public schools. So it made it harder to keep up as it became more and more expensive to educate our children in California. Another thing it did was to politicize the process of raising taxes. At election time, it's constantly on people's minds, and politicians noticed and started to really kind of stake out positions on whether taxes are too high, and to really make hay of that as a partisan issue in a way that it hadn't quite been before.
You touched a little bit on schools, and there's a lot that has changed since Proposition 13 in schools, but largely because of Proposition 13, schools now rely mostly on income taxes.
That, in some ways, has actually been pretty good for equality across schools. If you finance schools only from property taxes that are local, then places where property values are high are places that can afford to support fabulous schools with a very low tax rate. Funding the schools out of state income taxes does have the effect that higher income people are paying more for educating children throughout the state.
And what are some of the other ways that schools have found to build revenue?
So they have often turned to local parcel taxes, which is a tax not on the value of your property or your home, but a tax on the mere fact of owning a parcel.
And what are some of the pros and cons of that approach?
Someone who owns a home worth $5 million might be taxed the same amount as someone who owns a home worth $200,000 because they both own a parcel. And it's created more inequality of the financing mechanism within California communities.
And to pass a parcel tax, schools have kind of had to do what the people who backed Proposition 13 were hoping for, which is lay out how this money will be spent and presumably be more accountable to the voters.
School districts in California do have to tell the voters what they intend to spend the money on. And if you look at parcel tax measures, you'll see they're often very detailed in spelling out exactly how they intend the money to be spent. I do worry sometimes that leads school districts to emphasize flashy or popular ways of spending money rather than the ways of spending money that might be what the teachers and the students most need in order to accomplish effective education.
People are talking about a possible 2020 initiative to amend Proposition 13. What would that look like?
So one of the proposals is to preserve the protection for homeowners and raise revenue by reassessing large commercial properties at their true market value, which according to an estimate from the University of Southern California, could yield as much as $11 billion in revenue for governments of the state.
Isaac Martin, Chair of the Sociology Department here at UC San Diego, thank you.
Thank you very much.